Hi everyone, good afternoon from the global economic north, well, the so-called economic north. Today is, what is today? Today is Monday, July 9th, and it's a really nice day outside. There's a nice bright blue sky, and it feels like it's about, I just came from outside, and it feels like it's about, I think about maybe 30 degrees outside, so it's degrees Celsius. So I'm just thankful for this, summer weather. Summer is definitely my season, and I'm gonna call this video something like menstrual cramps, and I don't want to come across as being a person who follows principles of white female feminism. When I was in university, one of my disciplines in my preliminary university studies, one of my disciplines was women's studies. And I was very interested in learning more about how women experience prejudice and discrimination, but I was also very disgusted at how some women were very privileged. And when I speak about privilege, I don't mean to refer to it in terms of just financial resources, but white women, I have a very serious problem with them. And, I was reading all this stuff that they assign, because you have to read it in order to pass these courses. And I was just really sick and tired of hearing about how the white woman seemed to be the only oppressed woman in the world, even though she has her own house and she can actually have her own space to do writing. She's still an oppressed woman. And as I moved through my women's studies side of my preliminary university studies, I just said to myself that I can't relate to white women's feminism, because they're always talking about stuff related to biology and stuff related to sex, like the actual act of having sex with a man to start. And, in our culture, when it comes to issues that are feminist, I really like the works of the USA Black Feminism from Bell Hooks and Patricia Hill Collins. And, I just have to wonder sometimes about how things work in this thing called a knowledge production industry. I learned that in university, or when I was in university, I learned that, there's a lot of things that white folk are doing that is very problematic to a lot of different people in the world. And, but I was also interested in understanding just specifically the black-white dichotomy. I mean, you have all these other kinds of feminisms from women in India, or women of India lineage, and then you have Asian feminists, so feminism, so you have experiences from women in China, or a Chinese lineage, or Japan, or Korea, or Thailandish, so you have all these different kinds of feminisms out there. But the one that was really problematic was just this promotion that only white women can talk about how women are marginalized, and then when you actually are sort of in real world situations, it seems to be that there's a lot of these, like they have like these women's organizations, and it's just all like white women that are like running these things. And I'm saying to myself, like, what is this thing called feminism? And I began to learn a lot of things in university, and I was like, you know what, I don't like this white feminism because it's really problematic, and I just felt a lot of their tactics were gross and very, very problematic. So I decided to call this video Menstrual Cramps and or menstrual pain, something like that, because I feel that, based on what's out there when it comes to, female-centered literatures, I feel that there really needs to be more out there from a black female perspective. And I don't know what black female is out there that is saying to herself, you know what, how do I do this, how do I do that? And I want to be able to, contribute to also the feminist literature out there that speaks to the realities and the experiences of black females. So one of the topics that I find really uncomfortable to talk about back in the day is female things like having sex with men and hygiene things and menstrual cramps. And I used to get really grossed out with my cycle each month. I remember back in the day, I used to get these really, really bad pains, and I would be like cramping up, and just, it felt like almost like something was being ripped inside of me, and like shredding inside of me. Like, it was very, very intense pain. And I remember back in the day, like back in my teens, I was like, I can't deal with this. So I remember I went to the doctor, and the doctor prescribed these birth control pills. Now, I had no idea about this thing called birth control. I wasn't even in the mindset to have sex with men. And I'm a heterosexual black female. I don't do interracial bullshit stuff. I don't mix genetics. I don't do anything like that. But I was having these cramps, and I was like, oh my gosh, I need to just deal with this, because this stuff is like, this is killing me. So the doctor prescribed this these birth control pills, and it was set up in like this little package that had like numbers, and then you were supposed to take a pill every day, and then there was like a period where if you stopped taking the pill, you would start bleeding. And I didn't understand stuff related to manipulating hormones and sort of the natural processes related to also the black female body. We are not white men, we are not white females, we are not Asian women. We're very, very different. Our biology is very different. I mean, we can go out in the sun, we don't burn up. But when a white female goes out in the sun, she starts getting like all these like red dots on her skin. And then, depending on the temperatures, she could just burn up like a piece of chicken. So, I never really had any conversations with any females in depth in my family about, this thing called menstruation. And I didn't even know, like, to even prepare for this thing, this moment, because I remember back in the day when I got my period, I didn't even know it was my cycle. And I remember I was in the bathroom, and I was sitting on the toilet, and I saw all this blood, and I just started screaming, and I was very, very young. I think I was like in my early teens. I think for some reason the age 13. And I remember screaming because I saw all this blood. And then I remembered a female family member came to me. She ran upstairs and she said, "What's going on?" And I showed her all the blood in the toilet, and she said, "Oh, it's just your body changing." So she showed me how to place a napkin in my undergarment, and I can't remember what happened after that, but I just remember when I first saw all this blood in the toilet, I started screaming. I don't remember cramps or anything like that. And I'm glad I was at home and not at school. So, yeah, I just remember that. And over the years, when I, started delving more into, this sort of feminism stuff, I was just like, your menstruation is just really gross. Like, it's disgusting. But on the other hand, I didn't understand at the time certain bodily processes. I just was never raised in a way where what I'm understanding now, that in my black culture and more of the African side of stuff, your biology is not something to be embarrassed about. So, I was reading like different literatures, and, I came across stuff where I can't remember, I think it's in the indigenous community, like the First Nations community in Canada. These are the First Nations before the Indian Act ones came along. And, I was reading that in some of the cultural literature, I was reading that, was it in the First Nations? I can't remember, but it was just some literature. And they basically said that there were different rituals that a woman, I think it was one of my professors actually, my feminist professors, that was saying that there exists different rituals that you can do to prepare a young girl for transitioning into that reality where she can actually start reproducing and having children. So I didn't really look it up, and at some point I'll get to learn a little bit more about some of these different traditions. If I didn't have a problem with like